Now the second CIA story, which is about a most unusual trip, said the CIA director made to the West Coast on Friday. It was to respond to charges concerning the crack cocaine epidemic of the 1980s. Jeffrey Kay of KCET Los Angeles reports.
Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Dortch.
CIA Director John Deutch faced a largely hostile audience Friday afternoon at a community forum in South Central Los Angeles.
Thank you, Congresswoman Millender McDonald, for holding this public meeting, for giving me the opportunity to talk with members of this community about charges that the CIA introduced crack cocaine into South Central Los Angeles in the mid-1980s. It is an appalling charge. It is an appalling charge that goes to the heart of this country. It is a charge that cannot go unanswered.
Deutch pledged a thorough investigation. His extraordinary public relations mission to Watts came in response to a public outcry over a report by a California paper, the San Jose Mercury News. The three-part series, Dark Alliance, appeared in August on the internet as well as in print. Although the articles drew criticism by several major newspapers, they raised a firestorm of outrage and prompted official inquiries. The newspaper asserted that members of the CIA's army in Nicaragua helped spark a crack cocaine explosion in urban America in the 1980s. The report said two Nicaraguans, Danilo Blandon and Norwin Meneses, sold tons of cocaine to Los Angeles drug dealer Ricky Ross. The article said Blandon and Meneses funneled millions of dollars in profits to CIA-backed rebels fighting the leftist Sandinista government in Nicaragua. The articles showed no direct link to the CIA, but did include a photograph of Meneses on the right with Adolfo Calero in the center, a leader in the CIA-funded rebel army known as the Contras.
Much of the information in the articles is not new. Allegations of Contra drug connections have been the subject of congressional probes, news stories, and books. What is new is the link the articles suggest between the wholesalers and the retailers, between men said to be associated with the CIA-backed Contras and sales of crack cocaine on the streets. The series was written by reporter Gary Webb.
Did the CIA put drugs into the black community?
We don't have any evidence so far that they did it directly. And what we have evidence of is that men working for a CIA-run army did do that.
With the knowledge of the CIA?
That's the part we don't know. That's the part we don't know. I mean, what we know is that these guys were working for a CIA army. They were meeting with CIA agents before and during the time they were doing this. What happens from there is sort of where we ran into the wall of national security.
On Friday, CIA Director Deutch did not directly address the broad question of whether the CIA knew about drug dealing. Instead, he cautiously denied a conspiracy.
As of today, we have no evidence of a conspiracy by the CIA to engage in encouraging drug traffickers in Nicaragua or elsewhere in Latin America during this or any other period. However, I am going to wait and see what the results are of this Inspector General's investigation.
Even without hard evidence connecting the CIA with drug dealing, many have accepted that conclusion. A standing room-only crowd of about 1,500 attended a forum on the subject in September. LA Congresswoman Maxine Waters was one of the organizers.
Now, there are people who will say, well, Ms. Waters, maybe the CIA wasn't directly involved. Maybe it was just the people from Nicaragua and other places who were kind of CIA connected. Maybe they just turned their heads. Maybe they just kind of blinked and said, well, it doesn't make any difference. Whether they delivered the kilo themselves or they turned their heads while somebody else delivered it, they're just as guilty.
Waters has made this issue a priority.
We are going to pass out the San Jose Mercury News articles.
In the hands of activists, reprints of the series have become political pamphlets. They see the articles as confirmation of a long-suspected conspiracy.
We're here today to put a face on our outrage and our disappointment in what we know is a government ploy and a setup to decimate our communities.
The palpable anger has its roots in the spread of a drug many compare to a plague. Crack cocaine hit hard in the inner city starting in the early 80s. The drug is relatively cheap and highly addictive. It spread quickly. The crack business was lucrative for high-powered dealers like Ricky Ross, the man cited in the series. Ross, now in federal prison in San Diego, became an overnight millionaire.
At our heyday, as much as maybe $1 million a day, $2 million a day sometimes, maybe more, you know, a few days. This wasn't every day, though. Right. It was like we had days that...
That's how much you were taking in?
Right, in one day.
Ross says he complained to his supplier, Danilo Blandon, that he had difficulty counting all the money.
So eventually he bought us a money machine, you know, and he brought it over to us. And it eased the pain, you know, a lot. But eventually it even got too much for one money machine. We wound up getting 3 money machines to count it. Because one money machine would just be running, and then we'd have money stacked. And we hired people that all they would do all day was count money, eventually.
Full-time money counters.
Yeah.
Even though Ross is a central figure in this story, he can shed little light on the people he dealt with.
Blandon, then. What did you know about him? Did you know his name?
No, just Danilo.
Danilo.
And we used to call him Nika.
You don't even know his last name?
No.
Did he ever talk about the government, the U.S. government?
No, never.
DEA, CIA?
No,
nothing.
Never.
While Ross made easy money, Dr. Exelina Bean was coping with cocaine's tragic consequences. At the neonatology ward at Martin Luther King Hospital in L.A., she saw 60 babies a month born with cocaine in their systems. Today, Bean's anger embodies a common view that the black community has been victimized.
Every child, every baby, every child of a substance abusing mother and a substance abusing family should be considered a victim of violence and be entitled to reparations.
Congresswoman Waters says the strong reaction to allegations of government involvement in the crack trade is not surprising. That's because the drug has touched so many lives.
One thing that's very striking when you're out there, people would get up and they'll start crying. I have women who have gotten up and told stories about they haven't seen their daughter for years. Their daughter's on crack. They have the babies. Every audience that I go into, there's always a sizable number of people who've had it in their families. Sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, cousins. So this scourge has touched a lot of people, and there's a lot of pain out there. I mean, just a lot of pain.
Pressure from Waters and other elected officials has led to congressional and agency investigations.
The hearing of the Senate Intelligence Committee will proceed.
At a recent Senate committee meeting, inspectors general from the CIA and Justice Department promised thorough reviews. The committee also heard from a former Senate investigator, Jack Blum, who in the late 80s looked into drug trafficking by the Contras.
The answer you get to the questions you ask depends totally on how you frame the question. If you ask the question, did the CIA sell drugs in the black neighborhoods of Los Angeles to finance the Contra War, the answer will be a categorical no. Now, having said that, we have to go back to what is true. And what is true is the policymakers absolutely closed their eyes to the criminal behavior of our allies and supporters in that war. The policymakers ignored their drug dealing, their stealing, and their human rights violations.
But while Blum lent credence to some of the allegations raised by the Mercury News, major newspapers have criticized the series. The LA Times, Washington Post, and New York Times have all run articles saying the Mercury News overstated the facts. Leo Walensky is Metropolitan Editor of the LA Times.
Well, the main weakness was the basic allegation that the Contras had made millions from dealing drugs on the streets of Los Angeles, working through a Northern California drug dealer.
Walensky's reporters said the Nicaraguans sent no more than $50,000 to the Contras.
Also indicated that this drug ring was responsible for beginning the crack epidemic in Los Angeles and spreading it like Johnny Appleseed across the country. Found out those facts are untrue also, that crack started in various parts of the country simultaneously, and that crack was already in Los Angeles far before this story ever took place. The other thing that was questionable was the ties to the CIA, which they never said specifically that the CIA was dealing drugs, but there are a lot of implications throughout the article.
Waters says the criticisms missed the point.
It's not about whether or not this trafficking ring gave $50,000 or $50 million to the Contras. The main story is that there has been a connection made between the government, the CIA, and its involvement in drug trafficking to support the Contras. Can American citizens ever tolerate this kind of involvement or connection? We don't know how direct it was, whether or not they just kind of winked, blinked, turned their backs, but it needs to be known, and it seems to me that everybody would be interested in getting to the bottom of that.
I will get to the bottom of it, and I will let you know the results of what I found.
But if Friday's forum was any indication, members of this community have little faith in a CIA investigation.
This man coming into this community at this time, as far as we are concerned, most of us in this audience, is a mandate to close the investigation and to prepare us for him to say 6 months down the line that the CIA didn't do anything.
Audience members hurled a series of angry accusations during the fiery 90-minute meeting. One skeptical speaker after another used the microphone to voice anger and suspicion.
You know as well as everyone else that the CIA has been dealing drugs throughout the world and bringing drugs into this country since Vietnam's war. You brought them in here in body bags. You were in the Golden Triangle. So you're going to come in this community and insult us and tell us that you're going to investigate yourself? You got to be crazy.
Deutsch said repeatedly that any wrongdoers would be brought to justice. As he prepared to leave, he told an emotional audience he would take the charges seriously.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me come here today. You know, I've learned something. I've learned how important it is for our government and for our agency to get on top of this problem and stop it. I just want to say that I came today to try and describe the approach that I'm taking to address these serious charges. But I go away with a better appreciation of what's on your mind, and I go away with a conviction that we're going to do more to stop drugs from coming into the United States. Thank you very much.
The forum broke up in distrust and chaos, just as it had begun. Meanwhile, members of California's congressional delegation say they will push hard for answers to a fundamental question. What did the government know about drug dealing?
Underscore the word accusations that are nothing short of explosive. They are that the CIA knowingly and intentionally did what amount to pump crack cocaine into Los Angeles to help fund rebels in Nicaragua. Whether or not these claims prove true, the anger they produced is very real. The Justice Department and Congress are investigating, and so is CBS News. Here's what correspondent Bill Whitaker can report to you tonight.
The decade-and-a-half crack epidemic has exacted a ruinous toll.
It breaks my heart.
For 10 years, Eloise Dangerfield has been rescuing the littlest victims, crack babies, from the death grip in which the drug has ensnared much of South Central Los Angeles.
We see a lot of our children being neglected and they're abandoned, and all of this is behind crack.
Please! Along with crack came the thud of police truncheons, a boom in drug arrests and homicides.
Read it, but you can't just keep it to yourself.
So when LA's black citizens heard of the San Jose Mercury News reports claiming CIA-backed Contras opened the first pipeline for Colombian cocaine to their communities, their first reaction, shock. Their second, anger.
You want to know why black people don't believe in the government? because we know what the government is capable of.
My God, my God. What's next?
Facing life in prison, LA's biggest crack dealer now is saying he was a pawn in a CIA plot. And his argument was convincing enough that a federal judge postponed sentencing to consider evidence that his main supplier was an agency operative.
You know, his whole intentions was for me to make more money. The more money I made, the more money he made, and I guess the more money that he would have to help sponsor the war.
There is no evidence directly linking the CIA to the drug sales, and the CIA says its own internal investigation has found no connection. Yet here at ground zero of the crack explosion, the story simply won't go away, and new circumstantial evidence raises new questions.
Well, it's basically immoral. I mean, someone...
Prominent LA attorney Harlan Braun insists there is strong evidence of a CIA drug connection. Braun is no radical. In fact, he represented one of the LAPD officers in the Rodney King case. Earlier, he handled a law enforcement corruption case and filed this motion. It details a 1986 house search in which deputies found a man who identified himself as a CIA agent and seized documents indicating drug money was being used to purchase military equipment for Central America. Braun says most of the evidence was seized later by federal agents, the rest currently under court seal. Braun wants it released.
Someone in Washington made a decision that they were going to deal in drugs or ignore the Contras dealing in drugs, which basically assisting them because it was too important to defeat the Sandinistas in Nicaragua.
Eloise Dangerfield says it's all too horrible to contemplate.
We want to know, but I don't think we really want to know.
Knowing might ease the pain, she says, but it won't end the suffering. In Los Angeles, this is Bill Whitaker for Eye on America.
All of this comes as the director of the CIA was in Los Angeles today, trying to put down reports that the CIA in the past connived to spread crack cocaine in America's inner cities. Jerry Bowen has our report about that.
It was an extraordinary sight today. CIA Director John Deutsch on a high school stage defending America's spy agency against reports it sold crack cocaine in LA's black neighborhoods to fund the Contras.
Up till the present, I have no evidence of a conspiracy of the CIA to be involved in drug trafficking. But I'm keeping my mind open.
The CIA connection was reported this summer by the San Jose Mercury News and kept alive on the internet. But several major newspapers discounted the charges, causing the Mercury News to issue a disclaimer that it had not directly implicated the agency.
But here in LA's black community, the belief remains that somehow, someway, the U.S. government, if not the CIA, was involved in the crack epidemic that's ravaged a generation of African Americans.
Personally, I have two sisters who've been strung out 15 years. I have a brother who almost overdosed.
Jarrett Fellows is editor of the LA Watts Times.
The CIA knows about everything that happens in the world. For that amount of illicit substance to enter this community, nobody here believes that the authorities should know about it. They had to know.
83, you started running guns, right, and drugs.
Former CIA pilot Robert Plumley admits he was among those who flew the clandestine missions to supply weapons to the Nicaraguan Contras, and among the pilots ordered to fly drugs back to the U.S. Orders, Plumley says, came not from CIA headquarters, but from individuals acting on their own.
I do not want to see a race riot over an outright lie. The CIA did not, as a government entity, fabricate this drug movement.
In South Central LA, no one is talking of riots. The more common word is revenge.
You want to put a face on this specter, this boogeyman. Somebody had to be. We want to blame somebody. That's what most people want to do. They want to see a lynching. You want to hang somebody.
And that is why CIA Director Deutsch's visit may be a mission impossible. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Los Angeles.
In and around South Central Los Angeles, reaction to last night's unprecedented public meeting was predictably skeptical.
What are they going to say? Yes, they put drugs into the community? I don't think so.
Sure, the government was in. Don't you believe that?
Security was extremely tight as CIA Director John Deutsch defended his organization against charges it brought cocaine into Southern California's African American communities.
As of today, We have no evidence of a conspiracy by the CIA to engage in encouraging drug traffickers in Nicaragua or elsewhere in Latin America.
So you're going to come in this community and insult us and tell us that you're going to investigate yourself? You got to be crazy.
And how you going to bring this man in to pacify us?
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
During the hour-and-a-half meeting, Deutsch was booed and jeered so often that Congresswoman Juanita Millender McDonald had to control the crowd.
Wait a minute. If you don't like what's going on here, please leave now.
But they weren't about to let Deutsch off the hook that easily.
Give us some explanation and say, how did this cancer get here? How did it happen?
Well, it has to stop, Mr. Deutsch, and I hope that you'll help to put an end to it, because we are tired and we're hurt and we're angry.
CIA employees and I share your anger.
As the CIA caravan pulled away, many were left unconvinced and unimpressed.
For the most part, it didn't do nothing for me. It didn't bring back none of my dead friends. It didn't bring back none of these crackhead mothers or crackhead babies.
CIA Director Deutsch and the other government leaders promised to bring back answers and justice to the community. But the feeling here is that no matter what the truth may be, the CIA will never admit it. Manuel Gallegos, CBS News, Los Angeles.